Throughout my journey across medieval England, this door was a fairly common occurrence. It's a door that shows up on your raids that can only be forced open by 2 people. While you're waiting, Eivor will continually and endlessly bash themselves against this door until the slow and clunky AI comes up to join you. I cannot think of a more fitting metaphor for the experience of Assassin's Creed Valhalla. It says more than I could ever write with words. It's honestly so perfect that I could end the video right here. On a literal level, Valhalla is one of the jankiest games I've played in quite some time, and not just from a glitch perspective, though it's got its fair share. From a design perspective, there are some truly mind-boggling decisions that make me question what everyone behind the scenes was smoking when they came up with it. On a metaphorical level, this is my experience with Valhalla as a whole, mindlessly bashing myself against a wall, waiting for something, anything to happen that makes the experience worthwhile. At the time that I write this, I'm not very far into Valhalla. I've played around 17 hours and I've made it to the third of a seemingly endless amount of story arcs. There will be some people who say that it's unfair to review or critique a game if you haven't experienced all or at least the majority of it, but 17 hours is a lot. There's a lot of smaller and better games I could have played in that time. 17 hours is enough to tell me what the game's problems are, and enough to know that they're not going to get any better as I play further into the game. And even if they did, wasting all of that time before that point is not something I'm willing to forgive. What's most shocking to me is the overwhelmingly positive reception this game has gotten, where from my perspective, this is one of the weakest entries in the franchise to date. A franchise that, while maybe maligned by some, I've always thoroughly enjoyed, with the last game, Assassin's Creed Odyssey, coming in as one of my all-time favourites. I've split this video into 2 halves, one addressing the issues with the game design that I consider to be less important, and a second half addressing the serious issues with the storytelling and the representation of Vikings in this historical era, which I consider to be more important. Assassin's Creed Valhalla takes the gameplay format and rhythms established in Origins and then refined in Odyssey and combines them with some monumentally bad and questionable decisions to turn the entire experience into a chore. The most obvious of these changes, and also the one that hurts the game the most, is the reworking of your pet bird. In both Origins and Odyssey, the pet eagle is an essential part of the stealth experience. Before you enter the enemy base, you send out the bird to scan the area. It tags enemies, chests, secret entrances. It gives you the full lay of the land before you make your move. Valhalla has a raven instead of an eagle, and I guess the game designers decided that ravens were inferior to eagles because, for reasons beyond my understanding, they have removed the ability for the bird to tag enemies, or chests, or secret entrances. In fact, as far as I can tell, the only thing your bird can do is tell you roughly which building the quest objective is in. So they've taken the incredibly fun and useful eagle and replaced it with nothing. The layout of these areas is still the same, but there's no reliable way to tag enemies or locate chests other than an eagle vision ping you can send out that will provide a faint and hard to see glow where these things are, and sometimes it just doesn't work for reasons beyond my understanding. Not being able to see where the enemies are makes this game instantly one of the worst stealth experiences in the entire series. Next in the line of baffling changes from the previous games is the exploration mechanics. In both Odyssey and Origins, locations of note are marked with a clear and tantalising question mark. I guess the designers decided that it was a problem that you couldn't tell what the question marks were going to be, so now they've been replaced with these little glowing dots. I hope just by looking at this you could see the problem, or more accurately, not see the problem, because these things are annoyingly hard to differentiate. There's 3 different glowy orbs. There's wealth, which could be anything from supplies for your settlement to new pieces of gear. There's artifacts, which is code for collectibles and also pagan ritual sites. And then there's mysteries, which aren't actually mysteries, they're this game's version of side quests. You can probably guess that the gold one is wealth, but for the other 2, well, the light blue and the white, to my eyes, look so similar that I can barely tell them apart, and the white especially blends into the map in a way that strains my eyes to look at it. As the old adage goes, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. There was nothing wrong with the question marks. They were easy to see, and thanks to the detailing on the maps, you could usually guess what was going to be there if you took a closer look. But worse than the map's representation of these areas is the actual areas themselves. Wealth is wealth, whatever, but all of the resources you actually need are tied to raids, which have their own symbol on the map. The majority of the blips you can find out and about are upgrade materials, like carbon ingots, a resource that you don't even need to hunt for since you can buy it in shops. Artifacts are your typical Assassin's Creed fare, nondescript Roman artifacts, and those stupid flying pages are back too, which I think may just be there as a joke to annoy people. To my memory, Origins and Odyssey actually got rid of this kind of menial collectible hunting in favour of map location completionism. The worst of these is the pagan ritual sites, where you have to find and shoot an evil glowing skull to break the curse. The curse doesn't actually do anything to you other than put a dark filter on the screen and play some eerie music, but it does infer that pagan magic is real, which... okay, sure, whatever. The mysteries, which aren't actually mysteries, are side quests. But I put that in joey quotes because compared to the side quests of previous games, these barely qualify. I've seen a fair selection of these world events now, and they range from boring and forgettable to eye-rollingly stupid. The vast majority of the ones I've seen so far involve playing with children. Those are the boring ones, not the stupid ones. Like hiding in a bush for 3 full minutes while a glitchy child tries to find me. I've seen that the internet seems to like axe in the head guy, but for my money the most memorable and the most symbolic of all of these is the Walloper. You come across 2 kids talking about their granddad, the Walloper, a man who packs a wallop so mighty that he can defeat any enemy with a single wallop. The Walloper who resents this power, and he craves a worthy opponent to finally best him in unarmed combat. So here's a man that can defeat you in a single wallop, or to use the common tongue, a punch. A one-punch man, if you will. You see, this is a very clever joke that works on 2 levels. One-punch man is a thing you know, and wallop is a funny word. Pretty much every world event I've seen so far that isn't playing with children is a dumb joke like this. This one just hits all the right boxes for you to put your hand in your head for a solid 10 seconds once you get it. The last of these baffling changes to discuss is the skills system. Now, the skill trees in Odyssey and Origins were certainly not perfect, but I wouldn't describe them as bad. The same cannot be said for Valhalla. Valhalla's skill system is an absolute mess. Every level up you get 2 skill points to spend on this absolutely ridiculous and painful to look at skill web, where 95% of your points go into minuscule and pointless stat increases, and the remaining 5% go into skills that you should probably have started with. Abilities are not tied to this page, they get their own. Abilities are unlocked completely at random by finding these skill books, which can teach you one of a dozen melee or ranged abilities of varying usefulness. I honestly have no clue why they've done it this way. Being stuck with a bunch of crap because you don't find the abilities you actually want is ridiculous. This web of endless pointless stat boosts is not satisfying to fill in. There's honestly no reason to even check what the stat boosts are, because really, who cares? When it's a 1.2 increased critical chance, who honestly gives a crap? I've said many times and will likely say again that I can forgive bad gameplay for a good story. And while all of these weird decisions combined with a thoroughly average combat system leave this game as a chore to play, I could put up with it for a good story. Unfortunately, the story of this game, from what I've played so far, is not only bad, it is deeply uncomfortable to play. A few months ago, I made a video about my issues with the Assassin's Creed series giving a choice of your character's gender, and how it's a half measure taken to avoid making any real commitment to portraying real issues, and to appease sexist idiots who still buy into the idea that women didn't do anything before the 20th century. Assassin's Creed Valhalla's problematic elements extend much deeper than including a male option. Assassin's Creed Valhalla goes into full-on defensive colonialism territory. Let me pull a quote from Brett Devereux's excellent write-up on the game. His article, which I've linked before, goes into much deeper detail than I could ever manage and echoes my thoughts exactly, but this quote acts as a summary of the situation. This is a game where the Norse and Danish, in possession of a superior culture and unencumbered by effete Christian morality, take root in a new, populated land by force, and immediately proceed by virtue of their superiority to begin improving the locals. This is, without exaggeration, exactly the vision that historical colonialists presented of their brutal imperial regimes, and it differs from the actual historically traumatic experience of 9th century invasions in exactly the same ways as more modern modern experiences of colonialism. This is a game with deeply uncomfortable colonial overtones that I think were unintentional but also unavoidable. When you set out to make a Viking game, there's a couple of elements you kind of have to include. Vikings raid. That's their job. So the game has raids. How they've chosen to portray these raids leads to some really problematic results. See, the game cannot portray the Vikings accurately because if they did, then nobody would want to play. Like any Assassin's Creed, killing civilians will cause you to desynchronize. So you can murder all the guards, steal all the resources, and burn their huts to the ground, but as long as you don't kill them, you're the good guy, right? This is all tied up in the game's portrayal of the Christian Anglo-Saxons, which I won't hesitate to call actually offensive. The Saxons are consistently portrayed as weak, feminine, lazy, incapable of a real fight, and most importantly, using their religion as an excuse and a shield to do horrible things. Is there some historical accuracy in that last one? For sure, but this is all framed in opposition to the strong, noble, manly Vikings whose religious practices are correct and in line with the correct way to live. The narrative explicitly frames the Viking invasion as a good thing for the people of England. The Danes are better suited to use these lands than the silly Saxons who hoard all the resources in chests. We can put them to better use. The Saxons who give in to Viking rule are happier. The Vikings take their small villages and build them up into proper trading hubs. The Saxons who don't bow to the Dane invaders are weak, cowardly, and stupid. They need to be eradicated so the strong Vikings can take control and make everything better. I wish I was making this up or making it sound worse than it is, but this is explicitly the plot of the first 3 story arcs of the game. You must depose the bad Saxon kings so that the good Saxon king can take charge and bring peace, though there isn't much difference between the good king and the bad king. The good king is just the one who's willing to work with Vikings. Both men are portrayed as small, physically and mentally, schemers and plotters who let real men handle the dirty work. In the second, you must reclaim a settlement from the snooty Saxon lord who was the original ruler of the lands, but he wasted them. When the Danes came, they built a proper town. This snooty lord, with his dishonourable spies and sneak attacks, squanders the resources of this land. He must be cut down. Noble Lord Oswald is weak and womanly. He must be taught the manly ways of the Vikings to be a true leader of the people. This is all presented completely uncritically. The Vikings are completely unequivocally presented as the better people. Their society is more diverse, more welcoming of outsiders, genders seemingly treated equal by the Vikings, while every important Saxon so far has been a man. I'll point out right now that this framing has no validity whatsoever in real history. The Vikings were not nobly raiding the churches and monasteries to redistribute the wealth. They were sacking them for everything they were worth, including people. The Vikings were a slave nation who left those raids with more people than they started, as they took people to be thralls under Viking rule. While women warriors were likely a thing in Viking society, framing them as somehow more progressive than the Saxons is ridiculous. Viking society was still just as patriarchal as the Saxons. The Saxons were not the weak-willed schemers they are depicted as. They were equally warriors and fighters. They were most certainly not too inept to live, as they are demonstrated in a lot of the Jokey World events, and they had extremely justified reasons to resist the Vikings given, the slavery. Imagine for a second a game where you play as a British colonist, where you raid and burn down Native American villages for resources, desecrate their holy sites, and then the game tells you that the natives were actually better under your enlightened leadership, for you can build up the towns where they cannot, and your beliefs are true and their beliefs are false. Well, that would be a real fucking problem, wouldn't it? And yet, putting Christians in that role seems to obfuscate the issue. To top it all off, the aesthetic chosen for the Vikings is very poppy, not historically accurate at all, but what people think Vikings look like. They're covered in tattoos, they've got cool braids, and cooler undercuts. You know who else thinks all that stuff is really cool? Neo-Nazis, who've taken to using Norse iconography instead of swastikas to be fascist in a more subtle way. This culminates in a deeply unsettling and uncomfortable experience which, while obviously unintentional, was completely predictable. They need to make players want to play the game, so obviously they're going to cow the slavery. They need to justify raiding, so they give it a noble purpose. They need to justify the plot, so they make the Saxons an absolute evil caricature to make you feel good about murdering them all. And all of these sacrifices to making a good game lead the player to a conclusion that in this instance, colonialism is good, actually. Assassin's Creed has gotten goofy with its historical accuracy in the past, as I enjoy pointing out, but never has it fudged history in such a deeply problematic way. If the story was about the main character realising this, realising that the Vikings are not doing a good thing here, then that'd be one thing. But I know that's not the direction the story will take. It can't take that direction because raiding and pillaging is a core mechanic of the game. It's how you get upgrades, it's how you build your settlement. If you stopped doing it, you'd lose half of the game. To preempt any "who cares, it's just a video game" comment, I will acknowledge that on its own, the game is not a real society-changing event. Assassin's Creed Valhalla is not going to turn anyone into a colonial apologist. Problematic media is never so simple, and I think it's clear from all the positive reviews and genuine enjoyment people are getting from the game that most people did not engage with the game on this level. What it does do is contribute to a pro-colonial narrative in our society that we should be trying to get away from. There's still people today who go on live TV and defend the European treatment of Native Americans, will still claim that Africa was a land of savages and idiots before the Europeans arrived. And while it's a mistake to focus exclusively on European colonialism in discussions like this, that is the culture I was raised in, and it's the audience that Assassin's Creed Valhalla was released into. Media does not need to have a direct impact on society to be problematic or judged on those bases, especially when most of the audience don't notice the problems. Media about history is the only way that most people engage with history, and painting a false narrative about the Vikings as Aryan saviours of the Saxon people is just really bad, even if it doesn't have a direct impact on people's lives. I will try my best to finish the game, if only for completion's sake, and if somehow this video becomes inaccurate, I will take it down. But if you're watching this, then that hasn't happened. Assassin's Creed Valhalla is one of the least refined, clunkiest, and deeply problematic games I have played in a long time, and I have no desire to play it further.
Come here!